Welcome to the first CIMA event of the year. I'm the new CIMA president, Eric Hubry, and I'm here to, thank you, Bob. I'm here to introduce the group of experts we brought together today to discuss what's to come in 2016 and beyond. We're mixing up the format a little bit today. Farhad Manjoo from the New York Times is going to start us off with the keynote on trends that he's been following and his thoughts on how that impacts our industry. Then he'll be joined by three more industry experts, Bohb Blair from Starcom, Julie Fleisher from OMD, and Chris Wexler from Cramer-Krasselt. They will come up, talk about some of the things that Farhad spoke about, talk about some of the predictions from our sponsors, and anything else that comes up in the meantime. They're going to delve into those topics. Before we get into that, I would like to thank some people. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Viant, ShareThrough, and TubeMogul. Without our sponsors, these kind of events aren't possible. So on behalf of everyone from the organization at CIMA, thank you. Second, I'd like to, yes, please, round of applause. Second, I'd like to give a big acknowledgement to all of the CIMA volunteers. They did a very impressive job bringing together these experts and making this event happen all together. Thank you to Sarah, to Lisa, to Ron, to Brenda, to everyone that was involved in making this event happen. Everybody at the front door who helped check people in. All of that is not an easy job, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you for your help. So let's give another round of applause. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and for supporting this organization. CIMA offers, wow, that was dramatic. That was not planned. Okay. CIMA offers a great opportunity to learn from experts, to meet new people. So I hope that you enjoy this experience, meet somebody new sitting next to you at your table, and take something back to your job that you learned today. And if you enjoy what you have, what you experienced today, we have lots of other events that you can see in your program, and you'll see up here on the PowerPoint. We've got a social event coming up in April, Cubs opening day. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tickets go on sale on Monday, so be sure to sign up for that. We have trivia night in May. Is that right, Brenda? Trivia night in May, so there are tables, sponsorships available for that. There are all sorts of sponsorships available for all of our events. So if you'd like to partner with us, please reach out, please get your tickets, and please enjoy. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Farhad Manjoo, a technology writer from the New York Times, to the stage. Farhad.
Thanks. Hi everyone. Thanks, it's good to be here. Wow, these lights. So I'm going to talk about this moment we're in technology, sort of trends for the next year, but mostly trends for like the next 5 years, because I think that the next year is actually going to kind of suck. So I was at CES. The tech industry sort of kicks off every year with this huge show in Las Vegas called CES. We tech reporters hate going because sort of every tech company in the world comes there except the interesting ones. And even the interesting ones sort of like kind of hide. So like Microsoft has this huge presence at CES, but not actually on the show floor. They just actually just buy like meeting rooms. And so it's this like Yogi Berra quote, like nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. Like you go there, there's not very interesting stuff, and almost everything like will come out 4 years from now. Which it struck me as like an interesting metaphor for where we are in the industry right now. There's actually really, really cool stuff going on with smartphones and apps, and the smartphone is like the center of everything. But the smartphone is, 10 years old now, and it's kind of boring. And so it may be changing the world, but like everyone in the tech press and sort of people generally want to know what's next. And we do have really good candidates for things that are going to be next. Technologies that are going to change pretty much everything about how we live and how we work, and probably everything about marketing, but they're not ready yet. So things like artificial intelligence, virtual reality and its cousin, augmented reality, and things like the Internet of Things, home automation devices. There's a whole bunch of stuff kind of that was on display at CES, but generally, like you read about in the tech press, and almost all of it is in the prototype stage. So like the coolest stuff will have a huge impact on our world, but at this point, everything feels a little bit kludgy and a little bit like not quite done. So I'm going to go through some of them and talk about sort of implications for marketing and for everything else, but also explain why we have probably several years before any of these things reach the mainstream. Probably the most interesting one for people in this room, and probably a lot of people here are already working on it, is virtual reality. And the related thing, augmented reality. So like virtual reality, I just want to go through them. So virtual reality, we all know, you put on these goggles and you're in this completely virtual world, this digitized world. Everything that you see and experience is mediated by computers. Augmented reality, which the kind of most famous device so far is Microsoft's HoloLens, but there are several startups working on it too. And there's this kind of mythical startup called Magic Leap, which has raised a lot of money for their augmented reality system, but no one has quite seen it yet. And basically, this is like the holodeck on Star Trek. Like there are real people in the world. Like we could be in this room. I could have not come to this event, and instead you would have all put on these AR goggles, and you'd see a virtual representation of me. So it mixes the virtual and the real. And if it works, it would be sort of completely mind-blowing. Generally, if all the virtual and augmented reality stuff that I've tried has been pretty amazing. Like I think we're at this point where you can say it's going to be a real thing. It's not like 3D TV where like the manufacturers are pushing it, but then like you get it at home and it's like not that cool. Like if you, I think that at some point like it would be possible, like a real danger to society would be that like people would get addicted to virtual reality. Like you would never leave, because it's really that good. Like you're in it and it feels like, like it can make all your dreams come true. So basically, like the first applications are going to be like gaming and pornography, and like that's probably going to come pretty soon. So Oculus has released, started selling their pre-sale version a couple months ago. It's going to come out later this year. It's very much a prototype device. I mean, it works. It's cool, but it's not for everyone. The problem is like the computing requirements, the price. So it's going to be $700, but you need like a super fast computer to run it. So you're looking at like $2,000. Microsoft also started pre-selling HoloLens but it's going to be a developer version, and that's $3,000. And there are various startups. There's one called Meta, which is releasing these goggles, also went on pre-sale, and theirs is like $1,000. I think the problem, though, is not going to be the actual devices as much as the content. Like this is going to be very much like, I don't know how many people worked on the web in the early web, where like the web at first was basically just people were putting stuff on the web. They were thinking kind of as print designers and print content creators, and they were creating these analogs online. And so you had like the Wired magazine print version like put up on the web, and it seemed clunky. I mean, it was cool because you were looking at this online, you can get it anywhere, but it just didn't feel very novel or innovative. And then it took a long time, a decade or more before we got content that felt like it was born for this new medium. And what happened in that time was you had content creators sort of notice what users were doing with the medium and responding to them, and users responding to content creators. It's a long, slow process, and it's expensive, and it's prone to failure. People try stuff out, and they fail. Like we saw that obviously on the web, where like huge things were launched and they didn't work. You also have to figure out like how to monetize it, right? Like there's going to be the VR version of banner ads, and then those are going to fail, and then there's going to be the VR version of like some more native kind of advertising. And so there's going to be just sort of a lot of experimentation, and I think that's probably going to take longer than the actual technology. And then I think there are sort of fundamental questions about VR that we just don't know how to answer. So the first one is this going to be something that we use all the time, or is it going to be kind of like video calling where we do it sometimes? Is it going to be, like there are some companies, I think Microsoft thinks this is true of HoloLens, that it will replace the PC, that you will not any longer have flat screens, you'll wear these devices, and all your interactions with computers will be, you'll see screen-like things in front of you, you'll see 3D objects, you'll read on it, you'll do like things that are more like spreadsheets, and then you'll do things that are more like 3D design, all on the same screen. The startup that I was talking about, Meta, which is creating these goggles, they have a goal. I mean, this is an office of like 300 people. Their goal is by the end of this year, they won't have screens anymore, and they will be using these goggles to do their own work, to produce this. I think that'll be insane, but this is like some people's vision for the future of these augmented reality systems is that we just won't have screens anymore. And if that's the case, then like basically everything about like what you guys do changes, right? Like I mean, the whole kind of content and publishing world has been converging to smartphones. And if you think that like smartphones are going to go away and be replaced by some other thing, then like everything about media, ad buying, and like just advertising generally changes. You may have like instead of what I do, which is write columns, you may have people not reading as much anymore. You may have people watching more. I mean, that's already kind of happening, but like you could see that accelerating the trend toward video and toward video content and sort of less text content. There's also this question of like it could be a much more social platform too. Like if you are looking at no longer sort of have to look at a flat screen, and you could have like people commenting or sort of various like digital representations of people, you may not have like the idea of content creation may not be as important anymore. I mean, it could be like our whole everything we experience and consume could be just like a big virtual version of Facebook. So, I mean, maybe that would be awesome. Not. But there are these big questions, I think, that like haven't really been answered, and all of them seem at this point to be very much like sci-fi. Like you're thinking about this future, and it's not really clear like how it's all going to shake out. Like it could be also. I mean, I don't think people appreciate this, especially people who make VR goggles and AR. Like, it could just not happen. Like, people may just decide that virtual reality is something like, something you do instead of like watching. Like, it may be like a particular kind of show is a VR show, but most of the time you just watch like regular TV, and most of the time you just have like, you look at flat screens and you don't enter these virtual worlds. So we're very much in this stage where I think none of these things have shaken out, and I suspect it's going to be a decade or more before we kind of figure that out. The other kind of huge thing that I want to talk about that I think has implications for marketing is artificial intelligence, and specifically I mean the way that we sort of experience content now is often that it's one, like at the New York Times, we produce essentially one version of the newspaper, and we don't really like customize it and personalize it for different audiences. We're trying to do that more often these days, but it's still sort of like I write one column, I don't write a column for each of you. In the future, I think more and more of our sort of content experiences will be produced by computers and personalized for specific readers. And in that future, you may not, like sort of the whole idea of like creating sort of advertising content may also be created by machines in various ways, sort of like personalized content supported by personalized advertising, all created by computers, and then we just don't have any work. There's sort of huge technological barriers to this, but I don't think that they are as big as people think. Like everyone that I talk to in the artificial intelligence world suggests that, like, you know, a couple years ago, several companies, Facebook and Google, especially, started working with neural networks, and they found that there's this they essentially sort of cross this threshold where they think that it's possible to, you know, in the next few, like 1 to 2 decades, like approximate human thinking to a degree that, like, at some point, like, computers are going to be better at everything than humans. So this raises like huge social questions, like will we have any jobs? What will we do? How will we support everything? But beyond that, like just sort of in the more near term, like it raises this question of like how content will be produced and paid for, and whether like computers will be, you know, taking over more of that. In the sort of interim, the way that I see this, like my favorite new thing of the last few years, and possibly something that I think is going to be as big as the smartphone in terms of a gadget, is the Amazon Echo. It started out as kind of this gimmicky type device, but it's become really useful. It's this speaker you put in your house, you talk to it, there's no screen, it's all voice, and it doesn't really have any very amazing intelligence right now. I mean, it's sort of like, it's mostly kind of dumb, but so it's like not as good as Google, but it's good enough that you can do a lot through it. Like, you know, you can tell it to add stuff to your shopping list. You can ask it to do quick math if you're in the kitchen and you need like conversions or something. You can get the weather report and news. But at some point it's going to be, I mean, it already is a pretty easy way to shop through Amazon. If you have purchased something through Amazon, you can tell it to reorder it and it'll do it, and it'll show up at your house the next day. So, you know, there's no store there, really. It's just like you talking in your house, and you get something. And then they've made it an open platform, so other companies can add Alexa, which is this personality, to their own hardware. So like soon, you know, your refrigerator may have Alexa in it, your car may have Alexa in it. And then they've also opened it up to apps, and there are several retailers and also sort of product manufacturers creating Alexa apps that order stuff for you. So, you know, Amazon doesn't have any like exclusivity on it. Other people can create stores on it. So, you know, you could imagine this future of like, you're in your house, and I mean, there are already people creating apps for this. Like, there's a filter company, an air filter company, that has created an Alexa app, and so, you know, it reminds you every few months to change your air conditioning filters, and then you can just say, yes, I'll order it, and then it shows up at your house. You can imagine like all kinds of consumer goods doing that kind of thing. And then that really takes you away from like, yeah, I mean, there could be marketing through it, like it could sort of advertise to you, but it's not really like Amazon has sort of discouraged advertising on the platform. I don't imagine that like it's going to prompt you with like, you know, ads unrelated to your purchases. And, you know, you could imagine these kinds of things moving, like Facebook has this platform called M, which is also through messaging. More and more of our purchases and sort of commercial decisions will be mediated through these computers that we talk to, either chat with or talk to, you know, just in our houses. At some point, Echo is going to be the kind of thing where, like, right now you have to use a trigger word. You have to say Alexa and then do something, and, you know, ask it to do something. But at some point, maybe depending on like the conclusion of the Apple FBI case, but like at some point, it will not even require you to do that. Like, you could be talking to your wife and say, you know, we're out of peanut butter, and Alexa will hear that and add it to your list and just send you peanut butter the next day. That's going to happen. Like, I feel like we're at this point, you know, in the next 5 years where there will be artificial agents all around you, listening to you, and we will be able to sort of help you out and suggest what you should do and what you should buy. And it's hard to see. I mean, it's unclear yet, like what place marketing and content will have in that, and whether there'll be any place for it. I mean, that's the big question. So that's it for my part. To talk more about this, I have 3 friends coming up, so let's do that. Do I?
Oh, occupy this end.
All right.
You've called dibs on here.
So
Yeah, I'll
next
take
year's
the
going to
end.
suck.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way to start.
Thanks, Farhad. As we get started on this stuff, I want to hone in on the Amazon Echo because it
Yeah.
tees up where we're going here. One of the interesting, creepy things about that device, as far as I've been picking out, is that the thinking and conversion of your voice recognition is not happening in the device. It's actually happening in the cloud, which means that the Amazon Echo is listening and uploading every conversation that you have in your home all the time.
So it only starts sending like a second before you say Alexa. So it's recording
It's
everything.
only sending
but
when,
it's only
when it hears the
sending
voice
when
prompt.
it's, yeah.
Yeah. But does anybody find that creepy? Right. So there's
Well, I should say, so is your smartphone.
yeah,
But
yeah. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, but when our sniffers detect that there's something that maybe goes against our natural inclination with technology, sometimes we go, hold on, I'm not quite ready for this. So we have some awesome people up here. We have Julie Fleisher from OMD. We have Chris Wexler from Cramer-Krasselt. Yeah. And what we want to kind of talk about is, and if we could pop over to the other thing,
Look at that.
we want to talk about a couple things where we kind of look at innovation, but through a lens. And over at Starcom, where I work, we like to really take a very simple look at how we look at innovation and how we track with it and how we recommend using it for marketing. So there's always going to be innovation. It's going to happen every day. In fact, William Gibson said it better than we could. The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And so what we look for is we look for these tentacles of great technology that is getting adopted, because it's really the overlap of adoption that starts to become a lot more interesting, and whoever that adoption is important to you. Is it mass culture? Is it a specific little audience? Whatever it is, it helps really cast where we want to play within this momentum that we have going on with cultural adoption. So to kick things off, before we get into some of the topics that we'd all talked about before, we asked our sponsor partners to make a couple predictions about where we might land with technology. So first we got this great one. Native advertising is going to exceed $14 billion in 2016. Excellent. And that we're going to see a huge increase in global mobile traffic. This is a pretty safe prediction, I would say, because this is for sure happening, right? We're all in this momentous upswell of trying to get around things and do it with the way people are consuming content. The things I would maybe link this conversation to is a couple. One is that native advertising is getting a big deal for a lot of reasons, but display is pretty soundly moving from a click-based performance attribute to a branding performance attribute, and people are getting that and not expecting people to click on things anymore. Ad blockers are getting more sophisticated. There's a lot of things going on that are pushing us as advertisers to be closer or in fact in the content and doing things more natively that way. The other big trend prediction we got from our friends at Viant is that people-based marketing will grow exponentially. I hope that we keep doing that. Let's not market to the robots as much. Let's market to the people. That's great. Premium data, premium content. There is a huge discrepancy in the content out there, and starting to really farm that out into different marketplaces is happening pretty consistently across lots of platforms. And connected television adoption growing. I don't think you can buy a TV currently that wouldn't be connected. And as you see people upgrading hardware, that really shifts a couple important things. Our interaction with content tends to go more on demand as soon as we have a connected TV. But there's also a new real estate that we're not really talking about. And that's when you have a connected TV and you turn it on, the first screen you see is no longer NBC or wherever you left your television. It's a home screen. And I don't think it's going to be that long before we as marketers are starting to pay dollars to get involved in that environment and do some pretty interesting things there. So what we want to do is kind of look at a couple topics, and we'll just start with VR. Farhad, thank you so much for mentioning porn. This way I don't have to be the first one to say porn on the stage, which I
try to do
be.
at every
I
panel.
tend to be. I'm going to yank my chair a little out so I can see the screen and cheat a little bit. But it's really interesting to think about VR. and how we're advising our clients to participate in VR. And over at the left, we have the Oculus Rift, pretty established as the name brand, but whoa, what a bait and switch when we all heard that when we buy our $700 hardware, we now have to go buy another $1,500 computer to play it. And by the way, where are the content coming from? And they have a partnership with Steam Games, but that's pretty nerdy games. So if you're not a real big gamer, PlayStation, big announcement, March 29. PlayStation VR is supposed to be a big deal happening. Their game slate looks awesome. It's backwards compatible to PlayStation 4, awesome. A lot of great stuff going here, but it will be console-based. And so therefore, there's a gated ecosystem of content, right? Samsung Gear, the thing that's out there right now, works with all your Samsung phones. This is really fun. It actually works better than a lot of people expect. It looks fantastic. And the Google Cardboard, which is free and out there for everybody. What's going to drive the adoption? And that's what we got across the bottom row here. On the far left was the most safe for meeting image of virtual reality porn I could find. I'm sure the IT guys at Starcom are having a good time with my account right now. But Farhad, you said that's gonna happen. Oh, it's happened. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please do. But that ecosystem is happening and well underway. 2% of VR owners are already saying that that's the content they consume, and that's admitted consumption. It's also the first content format to monetize itself in the VR environment. To the left, you have what you can't read it, not intended to, but that's just the wealth of studios producing VR content. It's not one or two. And it's really adding to that list every single day. But really, who's going to be the big player that gets out there? Zuckerberg said that he wants to do a big bet with the NBA. NBA is already the most social platform, the most technology-focused platform in sports. Will they be the first to live stream VR? At CES, Intel was showing live streaming in VR. Pretty amazing stuff. For those who have only seen virtual reality through the cardboard, go strap on a Samsung Gear. Because the next thing over there on the list is the home screen on the Samsung Gear. And what's important to understand is VR is not just about a functional, immersive space. It's about an ecosystem. And the Gear has actually cracked the ecosystem, and there's content discovery, and there's app purchasing, and all sorts of great things happening that make it feel more mature. And of course, are we all just barking up the wrong tree with VR? Is it AR? And will the HoloLens be it, or any of those competitors? So, virtual reality, we'll start here, Chris. How are you looking at it?
Well, it's early days, I think. You said that very clearly. It's early days, and I think we're looking at it not consumer focused yet. I think the most interesting challenge for us is how do we build content that's appropriate for it and valuable to consumers. And so I actually see that in our world, prototyping is going to be the most interesting use of this. I think you already see this in architectural spaces. Where, and so when we're talking about building kind of comprehensive content environments, not just through media partners, but events and whatnot, and you're talking about investing millions of dollars to do these things, selling ideas through VR is going to be, I think, a big part of what we do. And so I think that's the biggest focus we have right now, is using it as a sales mechanism for ideas versus necessarily consumer focused at this moment. I think we're a few years away from having that be, have the critical mass to make sense for a lot of our brands. But I think it's going to be a really powerful tool to sell ideas.
Julie, do you have any clients experimenting in this space?
We do. So we've done some really cool VR work with Porsche. So you can imagine an immersive test drive experience, which is a great use case for the platform. We did something really cool with Gatorade with Bryce Harper. So you put on the goggles and you actually become Bryce Harper at in the critical last inning. And he's taking all of the pitches, and you hear his voice as the pitch is coming in and deciding what to do, and then you take the swing. And so VR is amazing because it is a storytelling medium that has finally arrived. I always think of it like Harry Potter and the Pensieve, like you're actually in there. And when you start to think about telling different immersive kinds of stories, it gets to be a very, very powerful medium. I think if my general belief is advertisers muck everything up. So I think if we start to think about VR as, oh, how can I stick an advertisement in there? We'll do a lousy job with it. But if you think about really immersive experiential storytelling and how you can create experiences that are meaningful, and maybe your brands are a part of that, that becomes a really interesting way to use VR. The challenge is it's not there yet. It hasn't been scaled. So how do we think about doing things that can have some natural amplification to them, or that really can live as very small experiences that don't need to be, universally distributed?
Go ahead.
We work together. We actually partner on Porsche.
Yes, we do.
And so one of the things I think is interesting there is that we used, combined VR as part of the message.
Yeah.
Because it's an innovation message. And so I think the really forward nature of the non-seamless nature of VR is actually a big part of that story.
Yeah.
And so kind of using VR as a analogy towards innovation within the Porsche vehicle itself was a big part of that.
I think that's a really interesting point on brands that have more of an obligation to go into innovative spaces than brands that really can go there when the audience is there. And,
Right.
and how do you judge that? Julie, I love your point on customized experience for the environment, right?
Yeah.
And there's certain environments where you just can't get away with putting your standard ad.
Right.
And this is one where it just won't fly.
Right.
Apparently it's obvious. Farhad, if I could make the question very specific for you, since you teed us up on VR, where do you see the opportunity for a significant mass tipping point? What would be the move that would drive everyone there, or people in droves?
Well, obviously, when the New York Times sent out a bunch of cardboard viewers.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that was a good example, right? Like,
Yes.
the problem with VR was that no one could see it. And so we solved that problem for our readers, at least, and allowed people to sort of at least experiment with it. But really, the tipping point is going to be the same, on a mass scale when people get these devices, right? Like, it's going to be an experimental thing, and no one's really going to know how it works in marketing or other content until people have it, and until it's sort of a mainstream thing.
I think that's a huge point. I actually, mailing out, it was 1 million cardboards, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what a clear statement about we're going to try this and we're going to get behind it and we're going to do something big.
The other thing is, you think about the adoption and the technology curve of it, and I think we tend to think about these goggles and then all of the content evolves, but the goggles are going to evolve too.
Mm-hmm.
And so those will get smaller and thinner. It will all develop to be a more accessible medium, I think.
Right.
Without question. And I think there's also a lot of marketers using it at place-based and experiential and all these kind of things. And I met with, to your point about B2B solutions, I know some companies are doing training videos for Major League Sports, and it's like there's a huge opportunity that's sitting behind the consumer-facing content ecosystem that's out there.
Right.
I think the one thing to note about it is that when it's done well, it has very deep, emotional resonance. Like, I've seen studies on it saying people feel depressed and scared if they watch content on VR that's very affecting. That can linger all day, which is an opportunity for marketing.
And that's just and that's just the Republican debates.
There you go.
Yes.
Anybody see the debates in VR? You're right in there. You're right in there. And there is a horror series called Gone that's distributed through the Gear thing that I didn't make it past halfway through the first episode. It terrified me. So, but I scare easy. So, all right, let's see what else we got up here. Designing for the small screen. Does everybody have a mobile phone? All right, so we all have these. It's obviously entered our lives, and as Farhad said, they've gotten past the wow factor, and now they've just become this thing that we do, right? Yet, for whatever reason, we as a marketing community have yet to really put it through its paces in the way we market on this device. Whether that be that we continually have to educate that videos are primarily consumed with the volume off, that people won't turn their phones sideways to make the screen bigger. And then you see something interesting like what Jeep did with their portraits ad for the Super Bowl. Beautiful, meaningful, all natively shot in vertical format and looked perfect on the mobile phone and then compressed for the large screen. Visual search has become more and more mature every day. Closest match visual recognition turning into immediate e-commerce. And of course, everything going on in mobile payment from Apple Pay to Samsung Pay, embedded things all through your phone. What's going on here? And I guess the double-edged question that I would throw out is, who are you seeing that's really doing mobile advertising in a way that's exploiting the full potential of the space? And how do you continually advise in your clients and partner relationships on optimizing that screen but keeping creative freedom in there? I'll start with you, Julie.
Okay, that was a little question. I think that from what I'm seeing, we still have a big gap between what we all know in the room, which is I call mine my binky, and it's never out of my hand except for when I'm on a stage like this. And it is the device that is the most personal and most used ever. And yet we're having a hard time still convincing clients that this is where they should move their money so that it follows consumption behaviors. And I think the challenges are, the monetization models and the ad models that are put out in front of there still generally suck, right? And the spaces are small, and we haven't really gotten to the point where we can measure returns, and it feels like a risky spend. And so therefore, despite the fact that that's where consumption behavior is, it's a hard sell to say that's where your advertising should be going. And again, I get back to this idea that advertisers usually muck things up. Advertisers in the ad technology space have done a really crappy job on the mobile phones because of all of this, all of the ads. My God, my New York Times, you guys have some sort of somebody has embedded something to the App Store that pops up in the first paragraph of every article. Can't read a damn thing because of this.
I personally apologize.
No, it's not. So the problem is the mobile phone is where we spend
I think it doesn't happen for subscribers, by the way.
I'm a subscriber.
No, I'm just kidding.
I pay.
Throw down.
I pay. I believe in journalism. So we've got this place where consumption behavior has moved. We haven't figured out how to use it as marketers, and the stuff that is out there is generally driving people batty, which is why we see the rise of ad blockers. So, I think we all, number one, need to clean up our acts, and number two, the onus is on us to figure out how to make it work. And I think the way you make it work tends to be to provide utility and service to your consumers and customers, as opposed to popping up ads. So I think the mobile app players are, and I'll talk about one of my clients, Walgreens, which has one of the best ones. But I think when we program something that helps you in your daily life, it becomes used, it becomes a reminder, it becomes a very important piece of technology that drives loyalty and the kinds of consumer behavior that we hope to speak, but it's not an advertisement. And so that's the kind of stuff that I see that works best on mobile phones, as well as beautiful fashion and lifestyle shots that can then be shoppable on Instagram and Pinterest.
Actually, despite them being your client instead of mine, I feature Walgreens in my futurist presentations all the time. They're huge innovators in linking wearables to rewards, in linking patients like me to their online dashboard. I'm just really impressed with a lot of the things they're doing.
Yes. His wife works there too.
By the way, my wife works there, so. Chris, what are you seeing?
I will say that the horizontal versus vertical argument is my first get off my lawn moment, because I hate that, but I know I'm the weirdo. I will say that I think this is what's interesting about the, mobile in general is we as an ad community have really been behind on this because we haven't been empathetic enough to the users.
Yes.
And we haven't, and the innovation has come, unlike most technology, even when we're talking about VR, it's a $2,000 gear and it's this. We're used to technology going top down, where it's very expensive and it gets cheap. Mobile was really a bottom-up innovation. There was major innovation coming out of Africa. There was major innovation coming out of poor neighborhoods that we missed as a group. And I still think that we don't understand mobile native versus mobile additive. And we're continuing to try to put this into a banner world versus into a mobile world. And so talking about utility. Utility is a big part of it, but talking about how do you actually use the phone. And I think the one thing we just haven't been able to wrap our heads around, because we are thinking about audience, we need to be thinking about location. Because location tells you a ton about audience, but I'm a different person at 7 a.m. getting ready for work than I am at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. And my location is my home at 7 a.m. or out on the town at 7 p.m. Those are completely different versions of me. And until we can think about creative more algorithmically, based on particularly location as a variable, we're doing it in store, we're doing it in some of the kind of the low-hanging fruit where, hey, I'm within X amount of miles from a location, we're doing simple triggering, but we need to be thinking about what are the 20 or 30 different need states, simple messaging based on location, and we're just not even close to being there on a creative basis. We're spending a lot of time at CK thinking about how to think about creative algorithmically so it catches up to the media technology.
I think that's an amazing point. I mean, the whole conversation around moment segmentation was happening a little while even before the real promise of mobile, but that's really where we're at now, of location, context, previous purchase history, all coming into this moment. What apps are installed on my phone? That's what I'm going to say to this person. But I think this overall point we're circling around of empathy is one of the most interesting pieces. We haven't created a marketplace that can empathize and balance the marketing dollars being spent with what someone's doing. We got conditioned to 22 minutes of content for a half hour, and that's a fine trade-off for some of us. But that doesn't seem to apply as well when you don't know in this moment whether this fractional interaction with a brand is more appropriate than making me watch a 15-second piece of video, God forbid, before I'm watching a 30-second piece of content on YouTube. No. And so we need a much more conditional marketplace to take into account what's going on. Farhad, you guys are straddling a lot of channels and a lot of environments. How are you guys looking at this?
Oh, I mean, I can't speak for the Times, but I will speak as a user.
No, speak for the Times.
No, I think, I've written a couple columns on this. I think that the rise of ad blockers could be terrible for everyone, but it might be the only thing that'll push advertisers and publishers and everyone else to sort of, like, it's the only defense that the users have.
Right.
Yes.
And as those numbers go up, I think people will be forced to start doing better, sort of forced empathy. And then, we may have better ads. I mean, the problem is at that point, everyone will have the ad blockers on anyway, so that's the danger you run. But as the numbers go up, my hope is that the ads get better.
Yeah. I was asked recently what the most innovative format of advertising was, and my answer is $9.99. Because for $9.99, I have YouTube Red, and I don't have ads on YouTube anymore. I have Netflix, I have Hulu, I have Spotify, I have Apple Music. I can, for $9.99 by platform, eliminate advertising from my life, and it's the best money I can spend. And I say that lovingly as an advertiser. But it is really interesting where we're getting with choice, and you don't necessarily have to experience these ads.
I think the other big change that we as a community need to embrace is a change in the way we do research. We can't just wait for MRI or Simmons or ComScore to put mobile as we've done it. We need to start borrowing from some of our brand planning brethren and sisters and get out and actually see people doing this and get out into the real world. This isn't math. This is a very personal device. The reason people aren't freaking out that Apple isn't unlocking the phone for a terrorist is because you're like, I don't want them in my phone.
I know what's on my phone. Yeah.
I know what's on my phone. I don't want it out there. And so it's such an intensely personal device. That's a different interaction than just TRPs.
Yep.
And if we can get out of the math element of it, I think we'll figure out ways to create platforms that are scalable, but we haven't done that yet.
So true. I will interject that Ron and Lisa are roaming the room with microphones. If anyone has any questions, flag them down. I will also warn that with the lights, I have no idea if you're doing something, so Ron, you have to be really overt with me. What else we got here? Live moments. This is kind of interesting. We've really had a changing relationship with what it means to do anything in real time. This conversation used to be 100% around whether people watch TV in real time, right? And now that we've time shifted all of that, the conversation has to be much wider than that. Snapchat has made an entire platform around uncensored, unproduced live looks at life. They not happen in real time, but that is a really live look in. Periscope keeps it in the moment. Did we all watch Making a Murderer the same week? And that was, a platform based on watch it on your own time. But culture demanded that if you want to be part of the conversation, you will watch it right now. And you will then know what you can say at the water cooler, which then really flips the dynamic on expectation and access, all the way to, these freaks over here that'll film themselves risking their lives with their GoPro for this live, really kind of unbelievable content currency and getting to a place and doing a thing that I'm too chicken shit to do myself, and that makes them awesome.
You're too smart to do.
Maybe that's it. I'll take that. So we have a completely different dynamic now with live. It's both eclipsed maybe what we can do with produced content for believability, And it's also made the cultural magnet of our content more critical and making it a real-time moment versus everyone has to watch it together. How are we taking advantage of this?
I think it's interesting. I'm going to throw out an idea that I've had percolating in the back of my head, and anybody in the room can steal it, because I'm not going to do it. Back when I was producing comedy theater, and that was ages ago, we used to joke that we needed an app or something that told us when it was too soon to make a joke.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, Hitler, not too soon. That's
Tragedy
okay.
plus time.
But unless you're in Germany, then it's too soon, right? But we kind of need that now. When is it too soon to have a spoiler? Because no longer is the water cooler a moment. It's I think you can probably expose secrets about Star Wars now. Making a Murderer, we're probably still in the window. But I think it's fascinating that we still, as people, hunger for community through shared experiences, and there's so few shared experiences left. It's the reason the broadcast networks are still relevant, because you have the shared experience of live sports,
Yep.
right? And
the Republican debates.
And Republican debates.
And The Bachelor.
And The Bachelor. I want The Bachelor in VR. So, but I think we're hungry for those shared experiences, and there's less and less of those in culture. And I think it's interesting that things like Snapchat, things like Periscope, even though Meerkat just pivoted, did you see that? I think but it's no longer a mass live moment. It's curated into smaller groups, and so it's keeping television relevant live, but what's the long-term implication for marketing? I mean, other than us glomming along to what's popular, I don't think we figured it out.
No.
But I think what's interesting is the antithesis of live is not delayed, it's control, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that our consumers are looking for. They're looking for the ability to control, they're looking for the ability to watch it when they want to, they're looking for the ability to fast forward through commercials or do whatever that they want to do on their own time. And so it's interesting that, at a point where on demand, whether it's video on demand or just the concept of on demand content is really on the rise, that's where live pops up. It's the zig and the zag.
Can I double down
You
on
may.
this?
Yes.
Let's take a little live moment that happened on TV really recently.
Okay.
We had the Oscars, we had the Grammys, we had things. There were a couple really interesting live advertisers, which Intel is one of your clients, right? The Intel Lady Gaga thing with Bowie, which was brave and interesting leaks reviews. The Target thing with Gwen Stefani.
Yeah.
How do you lump those into the conversation?
Now I'm on the spot. I think they are. I think they are interesting experiments. I think we're all trying to figure out how we break through. And I think whether you actually watched them live or you watched the Oscars and the Grammys delayed and you then got to these spots, the integration with the show, the unusual approach that, you could tell that there was something different about them. Even if you didn't know that it was going to be done live, you could tell that felt like it was maybe happening at the same time. I think that's more about how do we get people's attention, how do we break through, how do we create something that people are interested in watching when there's so much blocking and blunting going on.
I love that. Farhad, a specific angle on this with you. I've heard a number of people talk about if they're not posting something from the event where news is happening, it's already too late. Yet journalism takes time, and a cadence of released journalism takes even longer. How do you guys balance that, and is it different by screen, and how do you look at it?
Well, we tend to, I tweet. I mean, sort of like the way we cover news is that we tweet. We sort of cover it like on the social platforms immediately, and then the New York Times can like aggregate those and combine those in various ways on the site and in the apps and stuff. And then we have like slightly longer to kind of produce a more polished take. But like the platforms allow you to be part of the conversation as things are happening, and then do the more polished thing later on.
Well, that's perfect. That's a good way to look at that balance.
We actually do a lot of work at CK on content cadence.
Yes.
And I think often we think about, here are our ad campaigns, but we think about content windows, we think about always on, and so we are getting closer and closer together with our social and PR friends, because it's all one experience to the consumer. And so, live is one of those contents cadence that's, I think, really important for most of our brands. and it's different for each of those audiences. But I think we need to be starting to thinking about those cadences beyond just advertising and beyond like kind of entire brand interactions.
So true.
Yeah.
The content strategy for the brand is critical, not for a campaign, not for this little collection of 3
Exactly.
assets. It's for the brand.
Right.
Exactly.
Ron, keep me honest with, okay, time, all right. And any questions that might erupt? Connected stuff. Farhad, really, you got into this, and this is really interesting. Totally agree with everything you said, and specifically about the weird adolescence that we're in with connected stuff, right? It sort of works. It's not connected to each other, even though this thing is connected to the internet. Yet, we're in a world where connected car, connected home, the autonomous driving that may come as a second step of connected car, these are now spaces that are being regulated and culturally discussed before they're actually real. Wired magazine went out and crashed a car remotely to prove they could. How comfortable are we with a hackable front door lock and all the things that go into enabling our home actually might make us more at risk or whatever that might be. Yet at the same time, I want all this stuff. I want it for sure, you know? And at CES, I thought BMW's exhibit on connected home was shockingly great for it being a car maker instead of a home goods manufacturer. So where are we going into this? Julie, I think you're doing some stuff in space, right?
Well, this is the area that thrills me as a consumer and scares the bejesus out of me as a marketer, because I think this is where we all die.
And that'll be the end of today's session.
There we go. Thank you very much. Because I see, as you look at things like automatic replenishment, and you look at pervasive shopping lists with like Instacart, and you look at like Amazon Subscribe and Save and their Dash, and they've already got some, Internet of Things stuff that just automatically reorders so you're taken out of the process. Again, as a consumer, that's fabulous, because if I don't ever have to think about getting toilet paper again, that's great, because that's just not anything that I really want to have to deal with, and if you automate it for me and it's always there when I need it, terrific. But as a brand marketer and as a retailer, as you start to think about these decisions and these purchases that we used to make and have, we would be able to influence potentially as advertisers, and we would be able to win a brand, the more and more those get connected to the home and get automated for you, the less and less, we get a chance to win that sale. And that scares me to death. I look at so what I've always been saying to everyone is I look at the Samsung refrigerator, and for the past 5 years when I was at a CPG marketer, Samsung would call every year and say, hey, can we put your recipes on the refrigerator? And we would say, yeah, I don't think that's really the right use case. I'm not really sure everyone's gonna, go through their refrigerator to find the recipe. But this year, when they came out with that linkage to Instacart, it was like, well, brilliant, because that's the use case. I finish the eggs and I can just hit the button on the refrigerator so they're automatically on my list and ordered. And it's not gonna take long with smart packaging and with RFID in the refrigerator till it can sense that I'm just about out of milk, and it could automatically order that for me, and then it'll just show up for me. And so you think about all of these different purchases that are gonna be disintermediated or intermediated, or whatever the word would be, but so like mediated. Thank you.
Sure.
Mediated. So that we're taken out of the process. And there's a lot of things I buy that I'm really not interested in being a part of the process. And then there's some things that I buy that I really would like to be a part of the process. But if I only have to deal with those things I care about and I don't have to deal with all of the rest of them, my life gets easier, that feels better. And that's scary as a marketer.
I guess one thing I would say is, I don't know, I strangely have faith in you advertisers, because I think that you could imagine scenarios where the refrigerator says, you're out of milk, I'm going to reorder milk, or milk is a bad one. Let's say you're out of peanut butter, you're out of Jif, and it says, but I'll offer you a coupon to get Skippy or something. Sure. Like, you could imagine opportunities for not really offensive, but kind of like useful advertising in various, in these scenarios. I don't think it'd be out of the question.
Yeah, I think I'm super excited by this. I like change. I think this is moving towards seamless marketing, which is where we as if we're talking about future, that's where we need to get to. Mm-hmm. And this is going to provide data for us to make seamless solutions available. It does fundamentally change what we do.
Right.
Because if there's less leakage out of brands, because I mean, this could be the death of television. You know, not digital, not mobile, not other channels. This could be the death because the reason you need television is because every brand loses 20 to 30% of their consumers every year, and you need to fill that bucket, and the only way to get enough is through television. If that bucket becomes much tighter, if that leaky bucket is no longer near as leaky, all of a sudden our job as marketers change.
Right.
And we have to do different things, and it's about loyalty, it's about advocacy, it's about a lot of different things that we're just not currently built as organizations to do.
Right, they're different things that aren't advertising.
Yeah, but in the end, it's marketing. And so
Right.
I think it's vital for us to, I mean, not like marketers can stop this, but it's vital for us to get more data scientists. It's vital for us, right now, I guarantee you, Amazon knows more about me than the NSA. Like, they do. I hope.
I was gonna say.
I don't think I have to
Unless you did something really wrong, Chris.
Now they're going to know
Yeah,
more
now
about
they
me.
know more.
And somehow I'm comfortable with that. I'm less comfortable with the government knowing. With brands knowing more, with wearables and connected devices and all that, we have to be smarter. We have to be more seamless in our solutions. It means less 30-second, 60-second, half-hour long hero pieces and more utility, more algorithmic decisions. I'm a big enough nerd, I'm excited by that. But I don't think it ever replaces all that. The last telegram was sent in 2012. It's all not going away, it's just we're adding to it.
I think with the point about us all having to be smarter, we're going to have to end on this question. I've gotten the signals here.
Okay.
But I love the point about fundamental change, because that's what's happening. And as we track new technologies being adopted, that fundamental change excites me. And I'm cautiously optimistic to be surrounded by brethren who are thinking about it in such an elevated way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Michelle Carr from June Group. I just have a question with all the talk about wearables. Google Glass was never mentioned, and I'm just curious, is it dead, or what happened to it, or does anyone know?
It's not officially dead, but it's under like massive reorganization. I think they're working on, I saw some pictures of a new prototype, but I think it's going to be a while, and they're reimagining what it is, and I'm not sure if it's ever going to be a product at this point.
I think its death started when someone termed the phrase "don't be a glass hole," and then it started, going down like that.
But I think we built it up as a product as opposed to thinking about it as the first iteration or prototype of an experience that looks a lot like augmented reality that can do other things. I certainly think that we are all going to be able to leverage a little computer inside a something to make us smarter on an ongoing basis in a way that's not visible to everybody else. It's just not going to be glass.
It's going to be the Newton to smartphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new screen of your
idea.
phone.
I'm glad we went through this entire conversation and didn't talk about the Apple Watch. So
Yeah, I was proud
that's
of
the other
us
one I'm
until you
happy.
just did that.
Well,
Was there any other questions?
I think that's it. Well, I want to get everyone out of here. I'm Ron Goldminus, the VP of Education, and on behalf of CIMA, I'd love to thank everyone on this panel. I thought it was really good. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the format. Please, we're open to all sorts of feedback. Sign up for the Cubs opener on Monday and get back to work. Thank you all.
Thanks.